Okay, all right. I think we are live.
Yeah, we are good to start.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, good evening. Welcome to Joomla Next May 2022. We are in the 10th episode of Joomla Next. So Joomla Next is a virtual event series initiated by Techjoomla to open up a new world of possibility through insightful sessions and thought leaders from the Joomla community. We aim to create a platform that connects Joomla enthusiasts to share the best practices, ideas, and insights. So we started this initiative in the month of August with the launch of Joomla 4.0, and it's been an amazing journey so far. We have been uh, doing this as a part of monthly event, and till now we have done 9 episodes successfully, and today is the 10th episode. We are really fortunate enough to have leaders across the globe. So here are some of the leaders, brand, feel from different corners of the globe. So today we are here and with the Joomla Next May 2022, and I'll hand over this to Parth, and he will introduce to the speaker of today's event. Over to you, Parth.
Hey, thank you so much, Branshu. So, really happy to be part of this 10.0 of Joomla Next, and really happy to host Brian Michel today, part of Open Source Matters and one of the presidents of Joomla and founder and president of interGen Web Solutions. So, Brian, welcome. Really happy to have you here, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of insights to share with the viewers. To just give you a quick brand, he has been the president of the Joomla Foundation and is the president of. He has been associated with Joomla in various capacities, ranging from leading and managing the resource directory operations to leadership for the world's largest community-driven. At interGen, he's the founder and president. He is responsible for the business operations, strategic direction, and business development. In between. Brian, I'd like you to start your video, maybe tell us a little more, and because I've been really brief in the introduction. No one better than you really tell us who you are and what you. Over to you, Brian. Welcome.
Great, thank you, Parth. Thank you, Parth and Ashwin and Amy. And as I see the everyone that's involved with Joomla Next and the entire Techjoomla team, one for just hosting this series. And also for the invitation to come to present today. As I see the list of the other speakers that you've invited previously, and I anticipate some of those folks are upcoming. It's a real honor for me personally to be included with that group of individuals. And I appreciate the leadership that they've all provided. And again, the Joomla Next, the folks that are behind Joomla Next and the Techjoomla team. So I think these types of events are the lifeblood of the community. It helps keep us all connected, whether virtually and then ideally moving forward in person again sometime very soon. So thank you again for the invitation. I also just like to start with gratitude in general for everybody that's been involved in. Parth, do you mind just confirming that you can see my slide?
I can't see the slide yet.
Let's try that.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, slide, yeah.
So I just, one of the overriding feelings that I always get whenever I'm participating in anything Joomla related is gratitude. It's really been the motivating force behind any involvement that I've had with the project. Really, my involvement started as a way to thank the developers of Joomla. Specifically the core developers, those that have created this amazing open source free solution for all of us to share. So I want to thank the developers of Joomla. I want to thank the project volunteers and everybody that's working within the Joomla ecosystem, whether you're an integrator, an extension developer, whether you're helping with marketing in whatever capacity. All of those efforts are greatly appreciated by me personally. If you're watching this presentation, it's likely because of some exposure you've had to Joomla already. Your presence, your active engagement, you make all of us better. And by us, I mean you in particular. By you, I mean us. We're all one within Joomla. You know altogether. So thank you. I just feel gratitude for everyone and their contributions. I do have to start my presentation today with a confession. The title of today's talk is Joomla Forever, Creating Business Leverage in the Open Source Ecosystem. I actually don't love the title of the talk, and I'm the guy that wrote it. I'm going to start with all of my complaints about my own title and my subtitle, and then we'll unpack what I was trying to get after. First of all, the subtitle. I don't love creating business leverage in the open source ecosystem because it is guilty of what I call word salad. It's sort of the business jargon that we all use when talking about the contributions that we make. It's sort of in the spirit of optimizing and leveraging for full-scale enterprise-level performance metrics that hit the KPIs and consistently outperform market-leading competitive landscapes to bring you to the next level. You get the idea. It's a whole bunch of business jargon that uses a lot of words and says very little. I did have particular meanings behind creating business leverage in the open source ecosystem, and I'm going to try and simplify that through my comments today. So we're going to unpack that over the next half hour or so, and then I will give you what I hope is a more succinct and meaningful statement at the end of today's presentation. Joomla Forever, it's so hard to avoid playing into Joomla 4. This is not a joke about how long development took. It is really just kind of filling in as that spot to talk about the enthusiasm I have about the persistence of Joomla. And not just Joomla as software, but Joomla as an expression of an idea about how software should be made and what should happen. So I would love to see those ideas and those concepts persist well beyond. Joomla Forever with the exclamation point and the multicolor stuff. It reminds me of something out of my 1980s American high school teenage experience. I want to get out my leg warmers and untie my high tops and put on my skinny jeans and grab my boombox and talk about Joomla Forever. But really, it's just talking about my hope about the philosophy of Joomla and that it would persist well beyond any of our involvements, because I think the ideas and the philosophy that motivate Joomla in particular and open source software in general are substantive and meaningful and help make the world a better place. So I don't love my title. I don't love my subtitle. Why are we here? Well, we're here for, I think, 4 reasons. The first is which is that I'm an avid and terrible gardener, and I promise I will connect that to where things fit. But I did talk about an ecosystem in my subtitle, so I'm going to connect that to my terrible gardening experiences. I'm also addicted to audiobooks. So much of what you're going to hear today is a distillation of many, many hours spent listening to audiobooks, many of which are business related. A lot of them are recreational, but hopefully there's some insight to be gained in the many hours I've spent listening. I'll be sharing some of my favorite titles with you as well. In addition, as Parth mentioned, I am the founder and president of interGen. It's a website development and hosting company here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is in the northern part of the United States. And I'll be talking a little bit about how the gardening and the books and the philosophy and open source all tie into my experience with interGen. And then probably the reason most of the folks would have any interest in what I might have to contribute to the conversation is a reflection of the volunteer efforts that I've shared with the Joomla community over the last decade or so. I did serve starting in 2013 as the team. I had just started as a volunteer with the Joomla Resources Directory and was blessed to work with a number of individuals who provided great leadership for that team. Don Russell was significant in that experience. Eventually, I became the team lead for the Joomla Resources Directory. And then 2 or 3 years ago, sought out an opportunity to serve on the board of directors of Open Source Matters for Joomla as the treasurer and then ultimately as the president of the board of directors. This lists the dates that I served in those positions from September of 2019 to April of 2020. And then in April of 2020, I became president and served until just about this time last year. I was sharing with Parth just before today's live stream started that we're pretty much at the 1-year anniversary since my departure from the board. It's been an amazing, wonderful year. It's been incredibly busy on the interGen side of things. I am incredibly grateful for my time on the board and for the support and the trust of the Joomla community during that tenure. I'm proud of everything that was accomplished in that time. Serving on the board of directors for Open Source Matters was one of the most rewarding and challenging experiences of my life. So I will always look back on that time with a great sense of satisfaction and pride for everything that was accomplished. And again, gratitude for the folks that shared that journey with me and were supportive of those endeavors. I should be clear that especially in this presentation and for all things moving forward, I no longer represent Joomla or Open Source Matters in any official or unofficial capacity. So the thoughts and ideas that I'll be sharing today are my own. I might reflect back on some of those experiences in my time as a volunteer, and I do look forward to re-engaging as a volunteer in a different capacity at some point down the road. But I just want to acknowledge today that I'm here as the president and founder of interGen, as a lover of open source software and of Joomla in particular. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my thoughts in that regard. The last thing I do want to talk about in terms of how things are structured is on this slide, there's one sentence in the middle of the paragraph that I'm going to call out. And it really talks about the relationship between Open Source Matters and Joomla. And I take a little bit of time to point that out because I think understanding that relationship is very helpful for potential volunteers, for other businesses, for outside stakeholders. Open Source Matters is simply an organization that provides organizational, legal, and financial support for the Joomla project. So the board of directors, technically Joomla doesn't have a board of directors, Open Source Matters does, but their role is to provide organizational, legal, financial support for the Joomla project. That's different than most other organizations where you have this singular, glaring visionary who's charting the course and making things happen. I actually believe most of the action happens on the other side of the equation in the Joomla project. With the volunteers and the leadership that's expressed every day through the efforts of people on the ground, writing code, helping with marketing, putting together the magazine, doing all of the amazing things that make the Joomla community happen. And I believe that we're best motivated when we volunteer as a way to express gratitude for the free software. The community also provides incredible opportunities for professional and personal growth. If you've contributed to Joomla, if you shared in the community, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Just an opportunity to meet other people who are on the same journey with us. So this is, these are sort of the two entities. The one exists to serve the other. And I want to be clear that it's Open Source Matters that exists to serve Joomla and not the other way around. I think it's really helpful to keep that relationship in mind. So that's point one. I talked, or actually point four of the three things I was going to talk. I'll work in reverse order. So that's really the extent of my reflections on my involvement with the leadership of the Joomla project. I do want to share with you a little bit of my background as the president and founder of a Joomla-based web development firm. It was originally formed, interGen, in 2001 to help churches and other nonprofit organizations identify best practices, to help them engage their stakeholders more effectively, and to develop leadership. I started my career actually in youth ministry in a Catholic church. And I was the guy on staff that knew how to help everybody else when something went wrong with their computers or their printers. This was in the late 90s. And when the church needed a website, I was tasked with it because I was the most technical person on staff. I actually started out with Microsoft Front Page to build the church's first website. And a short while later, there was a church volunteer that introduced me to something called Mambo. You can probably fill in the next 16 years of my professional life. I don't think it's an accident that interGen was officially founded within 6 months of the Joomla fork of Mambo. I was very excited about the potential of these new open source content management systems that allowed technical people to take care of the technical stuff, but more importantly, non-technical people to handle things related to content management. So I actually started out in Mambo and then Joomla, helping Catholic nuns update church websites. And they did amazing work given the freedom and the tools that these platforms provided. My involvement with Joomla as a volunteer came later, and it was largely an expression of gratitude for what Joomla has provided. I've been blessed to build a company and a career because of the shared efforts of the Joomla community. In the last 16 years, interGen has evolved from primarily website creation to a greater focus on hosting websites and ultimately custom development. interGen now has clients from California to Texas to Vermont. If you are not from the United States, just know that none of these places is anywhere close to where interGen was founded and headquartered here in Wisconsin. I'm gladly supporting Joomla extension developers all over the world. So while our client base is here in the United States, I love the opportunity to get to interact with companies like Techjoomla and other entities all over the world. And we also collaborate from a production standpoint closely with companies in India, Guatemala, Canada, and again, across the United States. I don't mention this just to chest thump or to be overly proud of interGen. All of it, and I mean everything that I just said, is a direct result of interGen's involvement with the Joomla community. Nearly all of it long precedes my time on the board of directors of Open Source Matters. So this is not, everything I just shared is not a function of my role in leadership with the project. It's literally just a result of volunteering and meeting people and being grateful for the contributions of others. And what I learned is that the longer I was involved with the community, the more that I had to be thankful for. So everything that interGen has done in the last 16 and in the earliest iteration, last 20 years, is a reflection of that involvement. So I want to provide a little bit of a pivot because I did share my love of reading and of books, but I wanted to get from involvement with Open Source Matters to my role as the president of interGen to trying to provide insight in terms of that leveraging business growth that I was talking about in the subtitle of today's presentation. Joomla has an amazing Greek community. There's an ancient aphorism from Greece, and it is said to have been inscribed at the Temple of Apollo. Everything that follows in this presentation are books and ideas that have helped to shape my journey, but all of that is rooted in trying to understand myself better and where I fit into the context that is Joomla and the business community. So my first encouragement is to know thyself. What do I mean by that? The first question I would have is, what is your interface? What is your way of engaging in the Joomla project or a Joomla related business? Are you a website integrator? Are you taking off the shelf extensions and putting them together to help serve clients? Maybe you're a designer. You're really focused on the aesthetics of the site. And that could be directly in template creation itself, or many times people will lay out websites in other platforms and then translate that into template design and creation. Maybe you're an extension developer, you're involved with custom development. Are you providing hosting for websites? And even if you don't call the service hosting, you might be in a reseller relationship with a host where you're providing additional services, backing up websites, providing software updates, helping to troubleshoot, providing support, training. These are all functions that add value within the ecosystem. Maybe you're a content creator or a manager. There's a lot of work happening around copywriting, around working with images to create things. I have a son who just graduated from college, and he's working for a firm right now. And he talks about he's getting paid to create memes because he's doing a lot of social media content management development. So maybe that side of creative social media management as well. So I want us to understand who you are, what your skill set is within the business community. The second layer is to think about where you fit structurally within the community. And you could be you individually, or it could be you collectively. I'm going to talk about that distinction in just a minute. Many of us, I know I did, started out essentially as a freelancer. It was realizing that there was a tool set that could benefit people and started a business to try and do that. The challenge of being a freelancer, of course, is you have to do all the things: marketing, legal, accounting, billing, support, website design and creation. It's a lot of things to juggle, and it's an incredibly challenging role to play within an organization. I think my sense is that's where a lot of the Joomla community is at. Many people are functioning as freelancers and serving maybe a dozen or a couple of dozen clients with all of the challenges that I just articulated. If not, maybe you're an employee, maybe you're working for a firm that does extension development or hosting, or is providing other services, website creation for clients. Perhaps you're a company owner. That's where I would feel most strongly affiliated right now. Is one of the challenges when you become a company owner is you sort of shift from asking the question, am I building websites or am I building an organization? And one of the books that I'm going to be referencing later very briefly, it's a book called The E-Myth Revisited. There's this concept of, are you working in your business or are you working on your business? And when you're working in your business, you've rolled up your sleeves and you're doing the things that your business provides. When you're working on your business, you're creating the structures and the processes that allow others to do the work of the business. And that can be just as, or sometimes more challenging than doing all the things yourself. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind when you're thinking about the structure of your organization. Are you more of a specialist? So the list that I referenced a moment ago, do you do one of these things really well and maybe a few others on the side? Or are you more of a generalist where you're providing a broad range of services to a broad range of people? And then within Joomla, it's interesting, there are quite a few individuals who have separate day jobs and they just love the community and they love the challenges presented by creating open source software. So we have a number of people that are community volunteers and a number of core contributors where this is their hobby. Blows my mind that they're doing other things on the side, but again, it provides that connection. It can also provide professional growth and development too. We've had significant release leads for the project where their day job has nothing to do with Joomla, but they are just committed to the project and to the ideals of open source software. So when I say know thyself, it's really a combination of these two slides, knowing what types of services you and or your organization are providing within the business landscape, and then ultimately understanding what your involvement is either within a business or a volunteer capacity within the project. So one is, and I hope as I've been sharing these two slides, you've been like mentally checking off which categories are most appropriate for you, because in knowing yourself, it's going to be helpful as I reflect on the other items. If you think back to the information that I shared about interGen, you might have noticed that I acknowledged I started out primarily as a freelancer integrator. interGen over the next 16 years then morphed into becoming more of a hosting company and providing services. We have a subscription service around caring for websites, many of which we did not build, but helping clients care for their website and providing training and support and a good hosting environment for them. And then in the last 18 to 24 months, interGen has been pivoting again towards more custom development work, bespoke solutions within Joomla. And we've really enjoyed those opportunities as well. So even if you are in a particular place now, as you evolve and change and grow and the landscape changes and your skill set evolves and changes, you might find yourself checking different boxes at different points in your career. So these are all helpful things in terms of knowing thyself. Next, where is your company at? I need to give a nod to Kelly Gordon. She and I have been playing Facebook Messenger tag for, I think, almost a year now. I've never met Kelly. I've never spoken with her directly. She works with an organization called Cyberpreneur Inferno, and her focus is on helping web agencies be successful. I do not know her business model. I don't know her pricing. And again, she and I have never connected directly other than through Facebook Messenger. I hope to address that at some point. I'll have fun showing her the clip of this video that I'm giving her a little shout out. You're going to see why I'm mentioning her in a moment, because she provides what she refers to as her 4x4 method of agency growth. And I found it incredibly helpful in terms of understanding my own business. So I'm eager to have that conversation with her and learn more about the application of that. But I'll share with you briefly that she breaks down business stages into 4 categories. There's pre-validation. I'm going to work through this very quickly. Validation, leverage, and then scale. Pre-validation is, hey, I think I'd like to get into the business of building websites. I wonder if anybody would be interested in my services. So you try it out. You might volunteer for a nonprofit organization to build a website or two, and you get good feedback. They like your work, and that moves you from pre-validation. You might do just a couple of websites into the validation phase. And I'm sure a lot of the freelancers listening can relate to this process, right? Oh my gosh, somebody likes my work. I could do more of this and probably get paid for it, right? So from there, you move into validation, which is, can I do this multiple times? I've proven my ability to create a product or a service that's of value. Now I want to validate that by repeating the process and trying to build some cash flow and some consistent revenue. From there, you move into leverage. Leverage is focused on, wow, there's a lot going on now, and this is getting to be kind of overwhelming. I better start to standardize some processes so that I can handle things and make sure that things aren't slipping through the cracks. So leverage is really about getting your internal operations and your processes figured out so that you can deliver the services consistently and with high quality and efficiently. And then scale is, we've got everything dialed in. We're looking for the gas can. How do we light this thing on fire? Really, all we need to do is take the processes that were developed in leverage and repeat over and over and over again. So all of this stuff, that's one part of the 4x4 method. That's 4. The second piece deals with what 4 areas you're going to focus on, specifically marketing. Where's your audience? How do people learn about the services that you're providing? Distinct from sales. Sales is, once somebody has learned about you, how do you get them from knowing about you to being a paying customer? So there's a focus on that process. The next piece is operations. Operations is everything that doesn't have to do with your core services. So I mentioned briefly a moment ago, I talked about legal concerns, accounting, how you attract and retain employees if you're building a business. Those are all things that aren't about actually delivering your product. They're the things that help you to deliver your product, which of course then is handled in fulfillment. Our team at interGen every quarter looks at all 4 of marketing, sales, operations, and fulfillment. We ask ourselves, where are we strongest and where are we weakest? And that helps us to figure out where we want to focus our time, energy, and attention for the next 3 months. So this has been an incredibly helpful tool in terms of analyzing our own effectiveness and how to level up as we continue to try and grow the business. I will share, just by way of disclosure, as we look at pre-validation, validation, leverage, and scale, I would argue that interGen is late stage leverage. We've been working on process now really intensively for most of the last 6 to 12 months. We still have some things to iron out in that regard. But the question that we're constantly asking ourselves is, what is preventing us from wanting to just pour gasoline on the fire? And anything that is scary to us, like, ooh, if we had 10 times more business, this would be a problem. That's the thing that we're working on nailing down our processes on and getting more effective at. So the overriding question for us over and over again is, what is preventing us from wanting to go to scale? And once we have those pieces ironed out, the next phase for us will be to make that transition from leverage to scale. And again, scale is focused simply on how do we do the processes that we've nailed down on a larger scale, more effectively and more efficiently. So that's her 4x4 method. That's been incredibly helpful for us. The other piece, and this is sort of a strange one, and it's one of the things I love about open source software, is whenever I'm looking at a solution for something, one of the first questions I always ask is, if I don't love this, how do I get out? Where's the exit? So it's super weird because the first thing I do when I walk in, I've just entered the conversation, but part of it is about security and safety. Like, if I move into a situation and it's not a tight fit, I don't want to be locked into a 3-year expensive long-term contract. And I've made that mistake. At interGen, we've acquired services that were a 3-year contract, and it didn't turn out to be a good situation, and you feel trapped. So one of the first things I like to ask that affirms a healthy relationship and a healthy situation is, if neither party is trapped, if you've got a clean exit, and that can hold just as true for our businesses and our organizations. I love interGen. I love doing what I get to do every day. I plan to do it for decades to come. But this whole process of understanding where a company is at in terms of validation, leverage, scale, I want to develop processes ultimately to plan an exit. What does my exit look like? And again, I anticipate that being many decades down the road. But if I envision interGen operating without me, it does a couple of things. One, if interGen can operate without me, that's awesome. Now I can do whatever I want in the business, the things that I find the most joy, the things that I'm best at. And the entire success or failure of the business does not rest on whether I'm executing consistently on things that I may not be great at or things that I don't enjoy as much. So it gives me more freedom if the business can operate in my absence. It also builds resiliency for our customers, for my team members. If the business can operate and be successful in my absence, that builds a greater sense of security for everybody else. So when I talk about an exit or valuing a company or how you might transition away from your company, it's not because you necessarily want to leave or you want to be done with it. It's just a good way to get some of those benefits. And ultimately, hopefully the work that we do can provide value and exist beyond us. So at some point, if there is an exit in place, it's nice to know how that plays out. So one of the big challenges with that is understanding what the value or the worth of an organization is. I've had an opportunity to help a couple of individuals manage exit into other opportunities and other ways of being successful in their careers. interGen has acquired a couple of companies along the way. And one of the things that's always a challenge when you enter that conversation is determining what your company is worth. So just as an exercise, if you're a freelancer or if you're a business owner, some things to think about, again, whether or not you're looking to sell or whether you're just looking to gain the advantages that I was talking about. So there's four main questions that I ask when I look at the value of an organization. I ask these of myself as I look at the value of interGen. And I would look at it for partners that might be looking to transition or to exit or do something else with their company. So the four things I look at for what your company is worth is what is your exit and why you should have one. I just covered that. What is on the balance sheet? Balance sheet is technical accounting jargon for what do you owe? What does the company owe other people? Do you have debt? And what do you own? What are your assets? And assets, especially in website development, often is the client list. So it's the value that the list of companies that you do business with is providing on a recurring basis. Another key question, and this is especially beneficial for freelancers, is what is your company worth without you? So if somebody were to take over, how much of the business relationship that you have with clients is built on a personal relationship, and they would just go elsewhere if you weren't running your company anymore. That feels good, it's affirming, but it does diminish the value of your company if everything is dependent completely on you. So again, it's really building the brand around your organization and how those things play out. And then the crucial question that usually drives the actual dollar amount in terms of the value of a company is what is your annual recurring revenue? That does not count new website builds. So any services that you do that are a one-off, you might do those many times a year. Generally, I wouldn't include those in a conversation about the worth of a company unless you've got a process that's going to guarantee that that stuff keeps coming after a transition or a sale or an exit, because really the value or the worth is what is the company generating from a cash flow perspective that's predictable, that's consistent, and that you expect to continue beyond some kind of transition. So if you've ever entertained thoughts or again want to build that sense of resiliency about how to plan an exit or a transition, it would be helpful to think about what is your exit, why you should have one, what do you owe versus what do you own, what's of value within the organization, what's the value of the company if you are not in the room, helping to facilitate those relationships, and then finally, what is the annual recurring revenue? Okay, so that covers my involvement with Open Source Matters. It also covers the majority of what I wanted to share with you in regards to interGen in particular. Now I need to deal with the items 1 and 2 that were on my original list, my gardening issues and my audiobook issues. When I say I have audiobook issues, it's borderline addiction. I actually hit a weird milestone this month. I started with Audible before they were owned by Amazon as a platinum member. I hit over 400 titles last week. And I've listened to almost all of them. You can see a couple that I have in the queue right now or that I'm listening to, but so I'm about 400 titles in. That translates into, I hate that they give you these statistics. It's so painful. 2 months, 5 days, 16 hours, and 14 minutes. Several years ago, I started listening to books at 1.5 speed so that I could get more content in less time. But I just love learning about things. I love information. I love different ideas. So what I want to share with you is some of the books that are part of that list of 400 that have been most helpful to my own thinking, especially as it relates to business, organizational growth, and development, and where all of those things fit together. I think you're going to see some recurring themes. I've only selected about 4 or 5, and I'm going to move through them relatively quickly. One of the first ones that I want to share with you is a book called Integrity. Integrity, and again, it's one of those like word salad things where it's used so often that it's overused and it starts to lose meaning. I'm very particular when I think about the word integrity. It's actually the highest core value of interGen. We have 5 values total. Integrity is the umbrella underneath which the other 4 fit. And it's the measuring stick for success for us. How well are we living out those core values? So when I say I'm particular about what integrity means, it doesn't mean just telling the truth or being honest. Integrity for me means aligning your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Again, integrity is aligning your thoughts, your words, and your actions. So it's making sure you're an integrated person or an integrated organization, that the things that you say, the things that you think, and the things that you do are all consistent with each other. That builds integrity. I believe it takes practice and conscious effort. It's not just, oh, there are people that have integrity and people that don't. I think it's a spectrum. And I know for myself personally, the reason we state it as a core value is it's a reminder to me. Every quarterly meeting, we talk about our core values and how we live those out with greater integrity. We identify areas where we've fallen short, and we identify areas that we've done well, so that we can continue to shape and grow ourselves in that regard. I knew interGen's values before I even understood what service we would be offering. Before I knew we were a web development firm, I knew that these were the things that I cared most about. It's our true measuring stick. The other 4 briefly are people, places, profit, passion. If you care, you can go check our website on what those 4 words mean within that umbrella of integrity. So I just want to acknowledge this book was really helpful in understanding the importance of that as I was starting to put interGen together 16 years ago. The next book that I want to reflect on is Start With Why. For those of you that did play along with my involvement on the board of directors for Open Source Matters, this book was actually really foundational in that thinking. There's the author, Simon Sinek, has become very popular in business leadership seminars and the business community. His contention in this book is that most organizations think about what they're going to do, they think about how they want to do it, and then maybe they get around thinking about why they're even bothering. Because everybody assumes it's just to make money. Well, we're in free open source software. Why? Why are we in free open source software? Why do we care? So Simon Sinek's argument is that we should invert the relationship, that instead of thinking about what we're going to do first and then thinking about how we're going to do it and then maybe someday getting around to why, his argument is that we should start with the why, thus the title of the book. The why informs the how, and the how informs the what. So the last piece and the least important piece is what we're doing. What's most important is why do we do it? What are the fights worth fighting? Why are we here? How are we going to fight those fights? And then ultimately, what does that look like? So what's interesting to me personally is every time organizations talk about their famous about page, right? You're going to do the about page. First thing they want to do is list the mission. The next thing they want to do is list the vision. And then finally, they want to talk about their values. Again, maybe often values are just left off. So they go mission, vision, values. So what that means is, I thought I had it. It's the next slide. What that translates to, values, vision, mission, is why, how, and what. And again, most organizations are doing what, how, and why. I want to apply this to Joomla as a project. If you look, the about page for Joomla, we lead with the mission statement. Then we have the vision statement. And to the point of nausea, I'm sure people got sick of hearing me talk about the values of Joomla. It's really the reason I wanted to get involved with the board, is I thought that we could be focused on them more intentionally and living them out more substantially. So But to use Simon Sinek's framework, we're going to do what, how, and why. Joomla leads with our mission is to provide a multilingual, flexible, and free platform for digital publishing and collaboration. It goes on to say other nice things about what this platform is going to provide, the software. So what do? We make software. How do we do it? The vision. We establish and maintain support a global community of volunteers. We create open software that is free, secure, and high quality. We engage ourselves as a socially responsible project. We build trust with our users. We communicate openly on all levels of the community, and we act autonomously as a project. And then why? Why do we bother with all of this? Well, we bother because we value freedom, equality, trust, community collaboration, usability, and transparency. If I use the Simon Sinek methodology, instead of reading those in the order that I just read them, I lead with the key values. Why does Joomla exist? Joomla exists to promote freedom, equality, trust, community, collaboration, usability, and transparency. Those are the core values. They should never, ever, ever change. It's the reason we're here. It's what we fight for. It's why we do what we do. It's the why. Next is the vision. How do we live that out? We establish, maintain, and support a global community of volunteers. We create open source software. We engage as a socially responsible project. We build trust. We communicate openly, and we act autonomously. And then finally, we get to what do? We build an open source content management system. It provides the rationale for everything up front. I hope you feel the difference in just changing the sequence of those two things. I think it's incredibly powerful. And again, it was that thought process that really motivated. We spend a lot of time talking about the what, the software. Of course that matters. It's the lifeblood of the community. But the why is really, I think, the thing that brings everyone together: the freedom, equality, trust, community collaboration, usability, and transparency. Next book on my list. I mentioned the E-Myth Revisited. That's the book famously out of which that concept of, are you working in your business or are you working on your business? Are you doing the things that provide the services directly to your customers, or are you building the processes and the organizational structures to get those services to your customers? It's what makes it repeatable and efficient. So that's out of the E-Myth Revisited, if that concept was at all interesting to you. And then Traction is a book that really focuses on process as well. So if you feel like your organization is in the leverage phase, Traction was great. It was recommended by a good friend of mine, Zen Baskerville. And he shared this book with me, and I had never heard of it. And what I loved about it is I shared with you that I've got over 400 titles in my Audible collection. Traction referenced at least a dozen of the other books that I had read. So if you're looking for a summary book, Traction does a great job of capturing the best ideas from a lot of the other stuff in my reading list, and then condensing it and sort of synthesizing it into one framework. It's also a great springboard then too. If there are books that they're referencing in Traction that you haven't read and you like the concept that the author is sharing from those books, then it can be a great introduction to some other business texts as well. So Traction and E-Myth are both fantastic if you're in that leverage phase and looking for how to improve process, hopefully to get to scale. How is value created? I don't recommend this book. I do, but not for the context of this talk. It's a really heavy read. It comes in at around 40 hours in the audiobook format. And a lot of the 40 hours is comparing the price of wheat to corn to other commodity crops in 18th century, 17th century England at the time. The reason I bring it out is because it really is the best, or at least the most famous articulation of how value is created. A famous quote from The Wealth of Nations. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves to their humanity, not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them out of our own necessities, but of their advantages. That's a really long, fancy way of saying the butcher, the brewer, and the baker all create something that's unique, that's special to them. But even, if the butcher slaughters a cow, it sure would be nice to have a beer and a loaf of bread with that steak for dinner. And the only way he's going to get that is by sharing some of the cow with the brewer and the baker. And they're in the same situation. Man does not live on bread alone, right? So the baker is just as interested in getting some of the beef from the butcher and then they exchange the bread for that. It's an elaborate way of acknowledging that's how value is created, by the way. At the end of the day, you still have the same amount of beef, the same amount of beer, and the same amount of bread that we started the conversation with. But in the exchange of those things, there's more value for all of the parties that are involved. The beef becomes more valuable, the bread becomes more valuable, and the beer becomes more valuable because of that exchange of value. And even though it really is a situation where the sum is greater than the total of the parts, because now each of these people, each of these three individuals can now have a complete meal instead of just subsisting on the one thing that they're good at. That's how value is created. You're literally, it's almost like making something from nothing. And that's, I think, one of the best insights out of the work that Smith did, specifically in The Wealth of Nations. I use that as a point because I want to get to another book that was very helpful for me called The Pumpkin Plan. And the basic idea of this book is he uses as metaphor, how do you grow really huge award-winning pumpkins? And basically it was to understand where the greatest value is that you have to offer and getting rid of the other distractions. One of the great and scary insights from this book for me was an idea that led me to entertain a way to increase productivity by up to 400%. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients, or put negatively, 80% of your challenges and headaches come from 20% of your clients, 80% of the work comes from 20%. So if you look at that, another way to think about it is if you were to prune the 20% of your biggest challenges, if you're to prune the 20% that cause 80% of the work, you've now freed up that 80% of the work. But it's scary because often making that pruning, sometimes, and I know when we went through this process several years ago, it was letting go of some of our highest revenue clients. But the effort involved in meeting the needs of those clients exceeded the revenue that they were bringing in. So we actually initially took a hit in revenue to free up the productivity. I don't like the concept of firing clients or getting rid of clients or speaking negatively. We love all of our clients and have felt blessed to work with them forever, even the ones that weren't the tightest fit. And that's the language that we understood as we went through this process, is we very deliberately went through our entire client list and asked ourselves, which clients are our best fit? Which ones enjoy the relationship the most? Do we enjoy the relationship where there's good revenue? We're providing great value for the client. Again, thinking back to that baker, brewer, butcher metaphor. Where were the clients where we were the tightest fit, and where were the ones where we weren't? And the ones where we weren't, we very deliberately worked with those clients to get them into situations where their needs could be met more effectively by other vendors. It was a blessing for them, and it was a blessing for us. And it really has fueled the growth that interGen has experienced in the last 2 or 3 years. So there's lots of other great concepts in the Pumpkin Plan, but that's, if you think about it, and if you really believe in that 80-20 concept, you can increase your productivity by 400% if you're able to help 20% of your greatest challenges that cause 80% of the work, find different vendors and different solutions. That frees up all of that time that you can be serving the other 80% of your clients. So finally, that takes care of the third item, which is my affinity for audiobooks. Finally, I want to talk about my gardening issues. I shared with you that I'm an avid but terrible gardener. I love gardening and nature because I think it provides some great metaphors for business, and this is the ecosystem part of what I talked about. This shot is from my home state of Wisconsin. It's probably within a couple hours of where I live. You can see it's all one thing. There's probably tons of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers and outside inputs brought in to create these very straight rows of one thing over and over and over. Probably patents applied on the corn that was grown. The farmer is probably not allowed to keep their seed to plant the next year, so that they're locked into a vendor relationship where they have to buy the same inputs from the same monster corporations over and over and over again. I think it's a fantastic metaphor for proprietary closed source software. This is an example of a farm that follows permaculture principles. It's hard to tell from this photograph, but there's hundreds of different varieties of trees and fruits in the orchards. You can see that there's a great deal of attention paid to the topography, to the landscape, and how water, the hydrology of the landscape, how water flows. So there's a great sense of the environment, of resilience. It's following permaculture principles, if that's a term that you're familiar with. So this would be a contrast to that monoculture one thing. Diversity is greatly valued in this framework. Others are allowed to grow and flourish. They're encouraged. Open source software does not just build code. Open source software builds developers. It builds other farmers. There's a huge emphasis in this context on understanding and adapting to context and environment. Shared with you that I'm an avid and terrible gardener. These are my squash. You can see that half of these are empty. That's because the plants in them died. But it's just part of the concept of trying and failing. In my gardening, I am persistent. I value perennials. Those are strawberries and asparagus and elderberries and currants. I'm only successful about half the time, but the half that are successful, if it's perennial, will be back next year. You'll notice there's diversity, there's valuing the environment. I use a lot of mulch, future growth, and less inputs. I don't care what the cost of fertilizer is this year because I don't use it. I don't use any pest control. I try and understand how the plants fit in the environment and then adapt accordingly. So just more concepts that are helpful. These showed up in my yard this year. The one on the left is called Creeping Charlie or ground ivy, and the one on the right is, I've learned, a common blue violet. These are initially, I thought, weeds, and most people in my neighborhood would be putting herbicides on their lawn to get rid of these. I've since learned that Creeping Charlie is part of the mint family. It's edible and it has medicinal uses. The violet on the right has been acknowledged by the Royal Horticultural Society of garden merit. Its leaves are high in vitamin A and C, and they can be used in salads or cooked as greens. This is what a big chunk of my backyard looks like. Again, I'm an avid and terrible gardener. But sometimes in open source, things pop up in strange places. And in this way, the violets are serving a particular purpose in their current context. So it's encouraged me to look for life and to affirm it, to be aware of the context, to encourage growth, even or especially if it is unexpected. So those are the principles that I wanted to share with you. The gardening, the books, my involvement with Joomla, my involvement with interGen. I just wanted to take a moment and talk about what's next. I was talking in permaculture principles about diversity. One of the challenges that I think we have within the Joomla community is we spend a lot of time talking amongst ourselves. And I was excited to have the opportunity to be invited to speak at the NAGW, that's the National Association of Government Websites. They're doing a conference in September in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is down south here in the United States. And I love it. I'm going to go and I'm presenting along other software solutions from Microsoft, Adobe. They're going to be talking about chatbots and AI and lots of other stuff. My talk is really easy though, because for the first time in a while, I'm speaking outside the Joomla community. I'm just going to be presenting the features of Joomla 4. I mean, who in a government context would not love open source software that's multilingual, that has a heavy focus on security, that introduces workflow for content management, that introduces third-party API integration through web services? It's like you literally can go down the checklist for Joomla 4, and it's everything that government organizations should want, especially in free and democratic societies. And it's an opportunity for me to sort of practice what I'm preaching by getting out of the Joomla community to be sharing ideas outside of our current context and environment, to be promoting open source software elsewhere. So that's what's next for me personally. And I think I just want to wrap today by going back to where I started. The title of the presentation, this subtitle, Joomla Forever, Creating Business Leverage in the Open Source Ecosystem. I hope some of the ideas that I shared with you serve those ends for you and help to achieve those purposes. Put more simply, I'm reminded of where I started my involvement with the Joomla community. It's the Joomla World Conference in Boston in 2013. And put more simply, this has really been a presentation about how to grow all together within Joomla, within the community. One of the things that I enjoy is I talk about diversity and pulling in different ideas. One of my favorite things about this conference, if I'm correct, right here, if you can see the green circle, is Matt Mullenweg, who's the founder of WordPress. He was one of the keynote speakers at that conference. Had some really wonderful things to say about Joomla, his respect for the community and for the project. But I think it's really cool that there was that cross-pollination that was happening even back in 2013. And then I think, I had to go back and look carefully, I think that's me waving my arm. It's hard to tell because the resolution is bad on this photo. But it's been a great joy for me to be involved with the Joomla community for over a decade now. And having an opportunity to meet folks like yourselves and like the team at Techjoomla. Again, I want to thank Parth, Ami, the Joomla NXT team, Techjoomla team. I want to thank the developers of the project, all of the volunteers, and most of all, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I do look forward to carrying on this conversation. I understand there's going to be a Q&A. I'm open to whatever questions or concerns people have to share.
Brian, this was a great session. Thank you for coming in. As we wait for questions from the audience, I have a couple. So, Joomla, for you as a company, what are you guys doing with Joomla? Joomla scaling as a system in terms of business opportunities for customers or other others.
Yeah, so the emphasis for us as a company within the last few months, and it's difficult. There's so many extensions that I would love to be like calling out and celebrating. We know within open source software that there's some extensions that are open for free, as in there's no financial cost, or buy me a coffee or buy me a beer and I'll help you out. Our company's always had a bias towards looking towards extension developers that have express cost and payment plan. I want to know that we're supporting a viable business model for that organization that's writing those extensions. So one of the extensions that we've invested in heavily, and I noticed that they were the winner of e-commerce for the CMS Critic Award this year, is Hikashop. We've done a lot with e-commerce recently, and using the customizing capability of that platform within Joomla. So it's exciting to know that not only does Joomla still have an incredibly avid fan base, but it's the platform on which, at least from popular acclaim through CMS Critic, has one of the more popular e-commerce solutions as well. It's beating out Shopify and WooCommerce and all the other stuff that's out there. So it's really affirming because we've been using that platform for quite a while. So a lot of our work in the last year or so has been invested in helping clients integrate e-commerce within Joomla with other solutions, product designers, and those sorts of things.
Absolutely. So generally, what you're saying is that extensions are kind of helping Joomla find new use cases, right? And bit of news, I had not seen that happen. So that's actually pretty cool that an extension of Joomla is kind of getting, giving Shopify for its money. So that's actually a very interesting. So generally from your time as Joomla president, of course, I know you can't answer on behalf of the board right now, but what was your vision for Joomla when you were leading the team?
So really, the big push at the time when I started on the board was getting Joomla 4 ready. It's funny, not quite we're like, 9 months into the Joomla 4 world. And of course, there was a lot of, it's easy to forget how much angst there was around that. And I don't claim any credit for that. The production team that did the work at the time, really what I was trying to do in my involvement with the leadership was to address any distractions so that the production team could focus on getting Joomla 4 launched. And while that happened after my tenure, Parth, there was so much conversation literally for years trying to get things taken care of. So that was really the focus, was to try and make sure that within the community, we were who we were claiming to be in regards to those core values that I was highlighting earlier. And I felt that if we could focus on things like community and freedom and trust and usability, that if we could focus on those things, then some of the practical day-to-day stuff, it doesn't take care of itself, but you're all on the same page in terms of trying to address those concerns.
So I think that's very critical. I think you really covered it well in your that for any kind of an organization, right? Whether it's a corporation or a non-profit or an open source, uh, things that you want to hold together is some key principles of, and that trust becomes important because Joomla is one of the Joomla, the software product, and what keeps the community together. So I think it's a very important piece, addressing the why and making sure that people align on that. And I think it's not just about people who are in the community today. It's also about attracting new talent to the community and new people to work with as potentially customers. Definitely a very interesting application of Joomla perspective.
Yeah, it's. I want to loop back to the first question you talked about, because I think there's, and this is a tension, I'm not sure how to resolve it. There's always been so much focus on market share when it comes into content management systems. And you had made a brief comment in response to my first question about different applications for Joomla. And especially with the release of Joomla 4, I think this has been the case for a long time, but I look at the Joomla feature set, when you talk about web authentication security, when we talk about workflow, custom fields, we forget, like halfway through Joomla 3, we get custom fields. And that came from an extension developer. When I talk about the ecosystem that surrounds Joomla, somebody created something of value off to the side and it got pulled into core because it was seen as valuable to the entire platform and so many different applications. So Joomla as a software platform is incredibly well suited for enterprise level applications. That's why I'm so excited about that presentation in September. It feels like back to the future. I get to share with government organizations from all over the United States what an amazing platform this is. Why would you want to build in anything else if you were a government entity right now? There's so much in the way of flexibility, security, the web API, web services integration. All of that is open for whatever systems they're already using. It has all of that flexibility. So I don't know how to make the leap though, because so many Joomla developers are guys like me. Started off in their bedroom building websites for small businesses and organizations. So there's this interesting mismatch in that. I think there's a lot of potential. And I don't know if there's something, and maybe talks like this help people to get from here to there, but how do you go from Freelancer integrating solutions into websites into more large organization enterprise level deployments? And I don't think that's the only avenue for growth for Joomla, but I think it's probably the largest untapped avenue.
I think it's one of the biggest ones. So we ourselves, we have been working heavily with government and tech as such. And the unique identity portal for India, that's the Aadhaar. That's like, I think the world's biggest identity program. That portal is Joomla. So it can be done, can be crazy. So if you're there, feel free to use the case study.
I actually use it all the time, Parth. It's my favorite because it completely obliterates any conversation of scale. If somebody says, can Joomla function at scale? You're literally providing identification systems for the country of India. Like, make me any other argument in regards to scale and functioning in a secure enterprise level environment. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Just there, the portal content for all these systems is the actual unique is in Joomla. So the portal service, all the applications that you do on top of it, the endpoint are there. But yeah, even that, I mean, the traffic it gets crazy.
Even that, Parth, makes the argument for what I'm talking about in terms of flexibility and systems integration. So you get to leverage the administrative capacity of Joomla, all of the security and the flexibility to run a different front end. And it feels like an edge case, you're really talking about headless CMS for Joomla in that context. But again, it's an argument for the flexibility of the system. And I wish I had 12 examples in that regard. I think it's an amazing case study.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think you can find quite a few. I mean, the way Joomla can be flexibly used. I think one of the things that we have seen when applying Joomla in enterprise or in GovTech is that when you need to build things, the same examples that you gave, right? Whoever or a website builder or you're an integrator or developer, I've always believed Joomla is like a Lego block, right? Or it's like a piece of clay. You can actually any way you want. And depending on the skill sets you have, you can actually do, so if you have X skill sets, you can do 3X with. So without actually having to gain those, right? So if you actually can get to the development piece in Joomla, there's no with it. I've seen full ERP systems built on it. So it's crazy what you can do. I mean, we have deployments in Agro and GovTech and where not. I mean, complex applications running on top. So I think there is no limit as long as people can really discover, understand the power that lies beneath. The possibilities are endless. Like you said, Joomla forever. A lot of possibilities. It's just about making sure that you get benefits. So I have one question from audience. Olivier has a question. So asking about, have you noticed any gain of interest from customers now that Joomla 4 is out? That's an interesting one. I have that one as well.
That's a great question. I think I have two responses to that question. The first is, generally speaking, the clients that interGen has are less interested in the platform than they are in the solution. And it's because, unlike us as web developers who may or may not have exposure to many different ways of providing digital marketing services, they just want to know, does the website you're building me do the things I need it to do? So a lot of times they're not as invested in the platforms that we're using. Or if they are, often, and this won't be a shock, if there's a bias, it's generally towards WordPress. We do provide WordPress services through interGen, but we're always leading with Joomla, always. And often the only reason that we would do otherwise is if the customer has a preference for some reason. So one, generally there's not a preference, and if there is, it's usually not led with Joomla. That said, we have a couple of clients that, I talked about sort of that reseller relationship where you fit in the overall ecosystem. So we have a couple of clients that have clients. So they're website developers, and they sort of use interGen as a backend layer in between their hosting provider and the services that they're providing to their customers. In other words, they come to us with the bigger technical problems. They want to provide Joomla-based websites, but they also want a layer of support if they hit a problem they don't know how to resolve. So we have a number of clients where that is the case. And for those clients, Joomla is absolutely the preferred platform, and they're super excited about Joomla 4. So as they're building their new projects in Joomla, they're ecstatic about the new features. And we'll go the opposite extreme of the conversation I was just having with Parth. You can rewind. I mean, the most common support request, what do we get? Can you help me reset my password? So when we can talk about web authentication, depending upon the device and the hardware that they have, we can take the biggest concern for security and for ease of use and eliminate it. So even something as simple as, how do I sign into my website to provide permissions or to make changes? So Joomla 4, yeah, absolutely, for the folks that are rolling up their sleeves and doing the work, has been a huge benefit, and there's a lot of additional interest.
So another question, I think, which is in the same relation, is that have you started migrating your customers to Joomla, existing Joomla customers? If not, when? And if you have already any specific challenges you would like to share?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that question part? The first part got cut off.
Oh, yeah, sure. I will. So a related question. So we talked about Joomla for inciting interest in new customers, interest in existing customers, interest in Joomla 4. I'm saying existing customers who are on Joomla 3, what's the monetization strategy? Are you already starting with that? Is that somewhere line? Any challenges?
Yes, we anticipate that that will be a significant part of the services that interGen is providing over the next 2 years, is helping clients with that transition. I know I had shared that the last 6 to 12 months at interGen have been especially busy. Part of that is helping clients with large custom components that are installed in their Joomla 3 websites, making the transition from 3 to 4. The developer community, the extension developers, I think have done a really nice job of providing transition for their extensions. So the first thing that we're doing, of course, is we're looking at how to get clients from 3 to 4, is doing an audit of their site, which extensions have a clear path from here to there. We've had to do some work on extensions where our client preferred or liked that extension in 3, and that extension did not make the transition to 4. So our developers have found the process relatively straightforward of getting extensions ready to move from 3 to 4. So if you're an extension developer and have done the work, thank you. If you haven't, I know from our team that that's not been an overly burdensome process. I know it provides additional challenges for developers, for website integrators to go through these periodic migrations. Joomla uses semantic versioning, which means every major point release, there are breaking changes. But what that allows us to do is to get rid of the mistakes of the past, or to move to newer platforms and let go of things that are no longer relevant. Platforms that try to never have breaking changes, that there's technical debt that builds up. So even with our clients that are on our regular hosting services, it's a strange thing to say, but I often will talk about, I like things to break early and often, because if that's happening, usually the breaks are very small and very easy to adjust. So we maintain a really rigorous update schedule. And as we work through that transition from 3 to 4, we're just looking for the extensions that have allowed a very smooth transition, and those that haven't, we just flag and then either strategize to move to a different extension, or we'll do the work ourselves to get those transitioned.
Awesome, awesome. So generally, I haven't really paid attention to specific challenges that you have been seeing from the Joomla community, Joomla for adoption, in the sense not enough extensions being compatible yet, or do you see that more or less? Because no, we were a little slow in catching up. Now I think most of our extensions are done. We have a that will get done in the next or so, but we were a little slow on the. Also wanted to see how much adoption is of ensure that, because once you start the Joomla for build process, you have to up your feature releases. So we want to ensure that you're balancing that out. So now, which is probably 9 months after, close to 9 months after the main Joomla 4 release. So, but generally, what's your pick community? Do you think people are catching up? Are some doing it at all? Because I think one of the things that was Joomla is the extensions, right? So that at least the popular ones make the run, because a lot of times they that will lead to users coming to Joomla. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's actually, I'm glad you followed up with that question. I always hate it when people say, oh, that should be easy, right? So the work that we've done for the components that were abandoned by the original developers, or they decided not to make the transition to 4 very small extensions. So when I look at larger, more sophisticated extensions, I do acknowledge that's a very heavy lift. So I always am respectful of the work for extension developers that goes into investing in that. But again, that goes back to the assertion that I made earlier. interGen, for I think almost since its founding, has had we used to look at extensions and we were always looking for, like, what's the lowest cost one I can get that has the features that I need? And now we're looking for what's the highest quality component with the best support, the best longevity of the developer. So that's like the opposite side of the question that you're asking, Parth, which is as an extension developer, saying, is it worth it? It's a lot of work to get from 3 to 4. And if we're going to invest in that, whether it's hours or dollars or both, if we're going to make that investment, is there going to be support from the community on the backside to affirm that investment? And for me, that again, that's the ecosystem thing, right? So of course, there are extensions that the integration community has decided not to invest a lot in. It hasn't provided a lot of value for their customers. But for those larger extensions, the ones that have a long-term track record, yeah, absolutely. At least I can only speak from interGen's perspective, but that's why we celebrate every time a company makes the commitment to move forward, because that's how we're going to grow the platform.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was muted. So absolutely, I completely agree with that. I think it's important to keep moving forward. It's really critical to get rid of the tech debt. And when we've seen it lasted a long time, Joomla 4 will be on for years, and Joomla 3 will be supported for some years to come. So that is, and I think slowly we will start seeing that option. We are already seeing, I think, on our end, a lot of the new customers to Joomla are going with Joomla 4, obviously, and that actually shows a lot of good signs there. Obviously, Joomla 3, depending on the number of extensions they have, things are not necessarily happening immediately, but they have a window. So that will happen, I think, over the course of this year or the next. So that's the kind of data that we are seeing on our end. So parting thoughts, Brian. What would you leave for the community, for the project, for the...
Yeah, just to follow up on that piece, every new build we do is in Joomla 4. So if we're doing anything new right now, it's in Joomla 4. And like I said, we're strategizing. We have many clients to be bringing from 3 into 4. And for us, it's not a if, it's a when and a how. And we'll be working through that process. In regards to parting thoughts for the community, I think it's really 2 items. One is, again, everything that I've experienced in the last 16 years that I've been able to share. It wasn't until 2013, so what is that, like 7 years, I was just alone in my office. I didn't meet my first community member until I was 7 years in. So if you haven't had a chance to, and I know it's going to happen, right? We're so close to being able to meet each other in person. I noticed there's a bunch of new groups popping up on social media. I just joined 2 or 3 myself last week for the first time. So there seems to be a real hunger to be networking, to be connecting, to meeting people. And we're in a landscape where the more people you meet, the more diverse the ecosystem, the more opportunities present themselves. interGen, our growth has exploded because of our direct involvement in getting to know other members of the community and in volunteering. And even though I'm not actively involved right now, we're starting to, our team was just recently talking about getting involved with bug squashing, just as a way to sort of get some exposure to the development. It's a great way to know what's coming up in terms of the project. So get involved. It's the best opportunity for growth for you, for Joomla, for your organization, for the community, for the world. And as I lead and I finish every time, just thank you to Parth, to the team that put this series together, and for the opportunity to come and just share some thoughts and ideas and my own lived experience from the last 16 years.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was an awesome time. I think you touched upon so many things, not just Joomla, but business, organizing, how to grow. A lot of interesting topics covered. I think this was an extremely interesting session. Thank you. Subhanshu, over to you.
Great, thank you. You're still cutting out for me a little bit, but I know there was a nice response in there. So thank you again for the opportunity. I really appreciated it.
Thank you so much. This was an awesome session. Thanks.
All right, take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll see you around next month with another episode of Joomla Next.
Thank you, Brian, for joining Joomla Next by Techjoomla and delivering an insightful session on Joomla Forever, creating business leverage in the open source ecosystem.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you
you. It's
very
been my pleasure.
Joomla Next.
Yeah,
Thank you, Brian.
thank you. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll see you around next. Thank you and signing off.
Thank
Bye.
you, answering. Thank you. Bye.